In this final episode of our special new podcast series, we continue our conversation with Professor Lynda Collins, the author of the new book, How to Succeed and Stay Human in Law School. Here, the focus is on well-being and mental health as central to your success and sustainability in the legal profession. From seeking help early to staying connected to joy and community, Professor Collins reminds us that thriving in law school means more than just getting through. It means showing up with authenticity, resilience, and the ability to protect your inner life, even when the external pressures are high. If you've ever wondered whether it's possible to succeed in law without compromising your health or your values, this episode is for you. Let's take a listen to our conversation from 2020. As a professor too, it's important to recognize that we also face those. There are days when I'm walking to school and thinking, oh my goodness, I have to teach this thing, but there's this other thing going on in my life. How do I get myself focused? How do I kind of focus my intentions for the day, which I guess kind of brings us towards this idea of meditation. So you mentioned that one of the tools that students might be able to use to find some level of balance is meditation. So for students who have never meditated before, what does that look like, do you think?
There's a really wide range of meditation techniques, and luckily in the past 15, 20 years, there's been a ton of study. And we know that these are effective in reducing anxiety, improving your cognition, so improving your clarity of mind. And happily, in fact, researchers have found that meditations of even as short as 5 minutes a day can be effective. The one that I do in my first year class is my first year torts class. We do this as a practice skill because I think it's so valuable as a student, but also as a young lawyer, Think about arguing your first motion or your first murder trial or the first time you present to the partners, right? So we might as well just do it right now. We'll do like 90 seconds of it instead of the 4 or 5 minutes I do in class. So we just start out by doing a breathing technique where you're going to inhale for 4 and exhale for 8. And most of us to get to 8 are going to need to provide some resistance. So like a blowing, I don't know what that's going to do to the bike. And thereafter, we just go into a super simple mindfulness exercise of just noticing our senses. So we can do it right now, just a short version. So we're going to breathe into the count of 4 and out to 8. Breathing in and out. 5, 6, 7, 8. And in and out. And in and out. And in and out. And now just let your breathing return to normal. And see if you can become aware of the temperature of the air in the room. Now notice the feeling of your clothing on your skin. And feel your body in the chair. Notice the stability. Then pay attention to what you can hear. Is there a fan or an air conditioner in the background? Can you hear your own heartbeat? And now just notice if you're having any thoughts. And just let them be okay. Don't follow them, but don't fight them. And now just entertain the possibility that you're doing everything just right. You're going to be fine. Then we'll take one more deep breath. You can open your eyes.
I feel incredible. I feel like I now want to do that every day.
It helps. And you know what? Even the breath alone, I've now had a number of students say they've used it before a job interview during OCI. They've used it on the way to an exam. And you know, I've used it on airplanes. That's my Achilles heel. I get really nervous on airplanes. And even in turbulence, where my mind is telling me I'm in a life or death situation, I've actually found some relief through that. So, yeah, these are now, you know, I should say, of course, this is not to say this stuff replaces counseling or medical help or whatever you need. I always tell my students this campus offers everything from meditation to medication, and it's all good. Anything that helps you is good. So, you know, I always tell my students, if you need help, please reach out. As law students, we're very lucky, and lawyers, because we not only have the university resources, but we have the member assistance program that is run by the Law Society of Ontario. It's fully funded, so it's free to you and it's entirely confidential. They have a 24-hour hotline, and they also do e-counseling and phone counseling. So, you know, please reach out for all of those resources. But in fact, if you integrate these well-being practices into your life, first of all, they'll make anything else that you're doing more effective. You know, if you're on medication, work with that medication.
Yeah. Why do you think that we haven't talked more about this in the legal profession? You know, I was in law school between 2006 and 2009, and I remember like not thinking about any of these things. And, you know, I'm sure that there were people that were doing that, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but what's shifted here?
Yeah, that is a great question. I honestly don't know how the profession got off on the wrong foot, so to speak. But I think what has shifted is really people courageously coming forward with their stories of mental health struggles. You know, and we're so privileged in the law faculty to have Orlando De Silva as our wellness mentor in residence. He was one of the first high profile lawyers to go public with his mental health struggles. And I think, you know, having that happen and having that, you know, repeated hundreds of times has really awoken the profession to these issues. But what's so exciting to me about positive psychology, the work of people like Sean Aker, is that it's really not just about acknowledging or treating or accommodating illness. It's really about cultivating wellness. And it's exciting to me to think that, in fact, cultivating our happiness is one of the most powerful things we can do to improve our performance. You know, so Aker provides a really great example in his book, The Happiness Advantage, where they did a study on doctors on speed and accuracy of diagnoses. And one group of doctors was given candy before the test, which they weren't even allowed to eat because they didn't want blood sugar to be a confounding factor. But they were given candy. It made them happy. They did the test, and then a control group just does the test in normal conditions. The group that got the candy and was happy, in a good frame of mind, performed the diagnosis more quickly. That's interesting. But fascinatingly, they had 2 times fewer diagnostic errors. So what does that tell us? So what it tells us as law students, if you've rehearsed your PowerPoint presentation for, you know, your upper year constitutional law class, you've done it 10 times, you know it. You have 5 minutes before your class. Do you spend the 5 minutes going over the presentation for the 101st time? I would argue the research suggests call your best friend, call your mom, book a movie ticket online, dance. One of my most brilliant, successful law school classmates danced before every exam. You know, and you can do that in 5 minutes, because actually any little boost of those good feeling hormones is going to actually clarify your thinking, refine your memory, make you better able to interact with your audience when you speak. So to me, that, I mean, obviously the mental health piece is crucial, but I'm really excited about that positive psychology piece and how it can improve our law school and the profession.
So it sounds as though, you know, if you were thinking through, okay, what should a student do the night before an exam? And I think sometimes students will say, oh, I'm going to study all night. I'm going to have a million apps open on my browser. I'm going to just keep working. Maybe to shift the conversation a little bit towards sleep, what I'm hearing is your piece of advice would be call it and go enjoy yourself do something that
Totally.
brings you joy and go to bed.
Yes. Some yoga and what, and it's going to take some winding down for most of us. Again, you're not a laptop, so don't expect yourself to just be able to hit shut down and go to sleep. Take the time that you need. But yeah, in fact, one of the really interesting studies I found on sleep, because there's not much on sleep in professional schools, it's mostly undergraduate and younger, but they've done some studies in med school, and this was a pharmacy school study, and just one study, but they found that all of their factors being equal, extra hours beyond 6 hours of sleep before the exam accounted for like a full letter grade improvement. So in fact, we are smarter when we have slept. And students will sometimes say to me, well, maybe it's just that the smart ones are the ones that have the time to sleep. So that too has been investigated, where you just take the same person, you test their cognition, you deprive them of sleep and test them again. And we get less smart. I mean, for myself, I'm just almost useless when I haven't slept. I mean, I'm forgetting keys. I'm like, as a parent, it's frankly not even very safe if I haven't slept. Like, so it's not just that the smart ones are the ones that have time to sleep. Actually, some of my smartest students, the ones that have, been most successful and happiest, when I surveyed them, the one thing that came up consistently was they all prioritized sleep in law school. So these were my students that were now, at Oxford doing their PhD. They were clerking at the Supreme Court of Canada. And they had a lot of different advice from my current students, but the unifying factor, they all emphasized that they prioritized their sleep.
And last question, what was your favorite part of law school? Was there a kind of a penny drop moment or an aha moment, or, just something that you really enjoyed?
Yeah. I did a co-op term, and I interned at what was then the Sierra Legal Defense Fund. It is now Eco Justice Canada. And my first day of work, Stuart Algie, who's a professor now at University of Ottawa, was the boss. And he said, I'm just on the phone with the White House. He really was. He was doing endangered species campaigning. He said, I can't talk to you right now. Read this book and I'll be with you in half an hour. And the book was a photography book called Wild by Law. And it was photographs of all the places that have been saved through environmental litigation. And I was really lucky that in that moment, I knew what my life's work would be. And my whole career has really unfolded from that one moment. So yeah, I always encourage students to get into internships, volunteer jobs, try stuff out, because that's how you learn what you want. Most of us don't know when we start law school. I thought I wanted to work in property law when I started law school. It's only by putting yourself in different environments that you find what fits.
That brings us to the end of this special podcast series with Professor Lynda Collins. Whether we were talking about sleep, mindfulness, or mental health, the message is clear. You can succeed in law school without losing yourself in the process. In fact, the more you protect your well-being, the more likely you are to thrive academically, personally, and professionally. Professor Collins' book, How to Succeed and Stay Human in Law School, reminds us that success doesn't have to come at the cost of joy, connection, or authenticity. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to define success on your own terms. Towards the end of the book, she offers us a good first draft of a game plan for law school. Here's the list. 1, invest in my relationships. 2, sleep, exercise, eat well. 3, minimize digital distraction. 4, use study strategies that work. 5, take effective breaks. 6, cultivate constructive mindsets and remember my values. 7, get help whenever I need it. 8, have fun. Thank you for listening. We hope these conversations offer you some tools, some hope, and above all, a reminder that your whole self is your greatest asset in law school and beyond.